Good morning, everyone. So this is Ma'am Elaine, and we are here for the discussion sa lecture 3. So lecture 3 is about the meaning of history. It talks about kung unsa ang history sa discipline, unsa meaning sa history, ahagi ka ng word na history, and what is the process really of studying and learning about history. So lesson 3 introduces history as a discipline and as a narrative. It discusses the limitation of historical knowledge, history as a subject on process of recreation, and historical method of historiography. Lesson 4 or lecture 4, the following lecture after this, presents the sources of historical data. So, ahagikan ang pagsulat ng history and how can we write history. So, the written and unwritten sources of history, so the two kinds, yung isinulat, yung nasa books, yung nasa diaries, nasa documents, and the mga non-written sources. So next meeting, we're gonna know about unsa tong mga non-written. So as well as the differentiation of primary and secondary sources. So from these written and non-written sources, what can be considered a primary and what can be considered a secondary source. So the lesson 5 or the lecture 5 discusses about historical criticism, namely external and internal criticism. These are important aspects in ascertaining the authenticity, the value, the reliability of primary sources upon which narratives are crafted or which are history are crafted from. So, technically, yung susunod na lectures, including this one, will talk about the subject, the field, the field, the process of learning history itself. So, lecture 6 pa ta magsugod og hisgot about first voyage around the world. So, yes. So, let's start. The meaning of history. So, history is derived from the Greek word historia, which means learning by inquiry. So, from the word, pag may historia, it means learning by pagpangutana. So, ang pagtuon based sa pagpangutana. Diri sa kanina Greek word, ang root daw sa kanang history is ayun nga, ang kagustuhan na matuto based sa pagpangutana kung saan nahitabo. So, according to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, history is a systematic accounting of a set of natural phenomena that is taking into consideration the chronological arrangement of the account. So, what do you mean by systematic accounting of natural phenomena, ma'am? Pag moingon ka og kanang history daw, it is a systematic process and step by step na pag-account or pag-record or paghibalo kung unsa ang nahitabo. What do you mean by natural phenomena, ma'am? Natural na phenomena meaning ang nahitabo jud. Ang natural na nahitabo, ang tinuod na nahitabo. So pag moingon tag taking into consideration the chronological arrangement, meaning depende sa pagkasunod-sunod ng event. So technically, a systematic accounting of a set of natural phenomena according to the time, the chronological arrangement. So that's for Aristotle. Pag si Aristotle kay systematic, the process step by step na pagsulat sa about sa isa ka event based pod sa time ug kanus-a siya nahitabo. So this explained that knowledge is derived through conducting a process of scientific investigation of the past. Some says na history is not a science. Kay dili man gud daw siya mahisgutan sa laboratory. It is just an art. But ito, what is accepted today is history is still can be considered a science because it follows the scientific process. Unsa day ang scientific process? The scientific process like yung high school bitaw nato na mga kuan, mga scientific projects. First kay mag-form kag hypothesis, and then pag maka-form na kasi mong hypothesis, you look for ways to investigate it, di ba? Ang saon nimo siya pag-prove, mangita kag evidences, mag-conduct ka og experiment, and after you conduct your experiment, you record about your experiment, you write about your experiment, and then after that, you make conclusions based on your experiment or based on your sources. After your conclusions based on your experiment or sources, diha na dahil na i-defend nimo ang imong hypothesis. So it is just like writing about an event. In history, the process of writing history or the process of writing about an event, syempre, magsugod man gyud na sa mangita ka sa imong topic. Then after that, i-defend nimo nganong kana imong topic. And after that, you look for sources that will support about your topic, na makabuild sa imong topic. After that, you form your arguments. And then from that, your conclusions na dayon. So, history still can be considered as a science because it has a process. Na dili ka pwede makasulat-sulat, makabasta-basta og sulat og history based lang sa kung sa imong gusto or like wala lang, sulat lang ka. No. Okay, so that's from the word historia. Next is the word history is referred usually for accounts of phenomena, especially of human affairs in chronological order. So here, this is the general na meaning of history that we know of. Pag moingon tag history kay kato na mga panghitabo sa past, ma'am. Kato na mga panghitabo sa past, but not actually no. Pag mastorya ta about history as a field, you cannot just say and generalize na tanang tanang past events, ma'am, apil sa history. No. No and no. Pag moingon tag ka ng si tawag ani, unsa day na mga events, ma'am, ang dapat i-appeal sa atong gitun-an diri sa history. Ato na siyang mahisgutan ang kuan sa to prerequisites para matawag ka na kanang historical event. Ito na siya mahisgutan balik unya, but I'll give you the gist of it. It's dapat human event siya. Dapat ang tawo ang ni participate, ni partake ani na event. Dili pwede silang dinosaur and silang animal kingdom because that is not part of history. Mao ganing dili appeal silang crocodile, no, silang dinosaur, there is subject na history because they are not humans. Second na qualification or like requisite before siya matawag na historical event, socially significant, meaning ang kana siya na event is dapat important sa society, dili lang isa ka tawo. Maong dili appeal sa history ang kagahapon ninyo sa imong uyab because so technically wala mi labot sa inyo, ha. Same with me. Anong dili man ko nga wala ko labot or nganong dili man ta malabot sa history because we are not socially significant. Dili ta sa importante sa society, except na lang kung mahimo kong mayor or mahimo kong presidente in the future, so mahimo kong part in history. And napato, but yes, history as a field, hindi lahat, and there are events na kanang si tawag ani, there are events lang, certain events na part sa history sa Pilipinas. So there are theories constructed by historians in investigating history. It's the factual and speculative history. So again, based sa kanang kuan, based sa pagsulat sa isa ka history ay sa isa ka event about hanta sa based sa kung giunsa pagsulat ang isa ka historical event based sa investigation about a specific event. There are two kinds daw of history. First is the factual history and the speculative history. From the word fact, the factual history represents readers or presents the readers the plain and basic information of what happened. What do you mean by plain and basic information, ma'am? The what, when, where, who. Kana lang siya, and walay labot kung unsa ang imuhang own conclusions, unsa imong own na pagsabot, and own nimo na analysis. So the factual history, it is just kung sa pagkaon pa ni mura rin siya salad, walay condiments. When a person or a historian is the one who writes history or the one who studies history. When a historian writes a factual kind of history, dili niya apilon unsa ang iyahang kind, unsa iyahang explanation and interpretation sa nahitabo. Pag magsulat siyang history in a factual way, or in factual na kanang sa tawag ani kanang in a factual na manner kay walay appeal ang kanang mga kuro-kuro niya. It is just about facts. It is just the what, when, where, who. Pag moingon tag speculative history, from the word speculations, including dere ang how and why. Ang feeling sa historian na nganong nahitabo ni, ang analysis, ang conclusion sa historian sa nganong nahitabo ni o unsay effect ani. Why do you think this happened after this event? Why do you think that nainani kadako ang iyahang impact? So that's speculative. Again, factual history and speculative history, the two kinds of which of history based on how it is written and how the event is presented to the reader. Okay, so history deals with the study of the past events. This is what I've said kanina. Individuals who write about history are called historians, and also individuals na nagatuon about history. So it doesn't really need you really doesn't need to write 50 books before you can be called a historian. If you really are interested about historical events and what is happening and the likes, you can be called a historian. So for the duration of this sem, we will be historians. So historians seek to understand the present by examining what happened before. They undertake arduous or like kanang sa tawag ani thorough na historical research to come up with a meaningful and organized rebuilding of the past. Again, meaningful and organized rebuilding of the past. So historians don't just organize and rebuild the past, but they make it meaningful. They make it in a manner, they write about an event in a manner na masabtan og mahimong significant ang kanina event sa atua. Because of this reason, matawag na arts history. Because a historian needs to have a way with words, have a way to convey sa iyahang gusto ipasabot og ang message sa event. Di ba mo na importante, di ba? Again, I would really say that the importance of this subject ay dili about sa what, when, where, and who. It is about the meaning of the event, the message, the lesson, and kung unsa ang mahatag ani na event sa atua. Unsa mahatag ani na understanding and all. So, but whose past are we talking about? So, dili na nitong na-mention ako kaganina. So, pag mayngon tag past event, ma'am, tanan, past sa tanan. No. In this subject, ang atong hisgutan lang na past is the important ones. The ones that is socially significant and the ones na naay impact sa whole na Philippines. Mao ganing Philippine history because dili lang siya ako ang history, but atua siyang history. So, this is the basic question that the historian needs to answer because this sets the purpose and framework of a meaning and impact value to a group of people about their past. The practice of historical writing is called historiography. The practice of historical writing, that's historiography. Historians are the one who writes. The practice of historical writing is historiography. Okay, the traditional method in doing historical research that focus on gathering documents from different libraries and archives to form a pool of evidence needed in making a descriptive and analytical narrative. So, si pasabot ani ma'am, this is the traditional and the usual na way to write history. When you want to know about what happened, when you want to write about an event, you go to libraries, you go to archives, and you research about what happened, you look for sources, you look for books, you look for narratives and documents about the event that you want to write about. But in modern historical writing does not only include examinations of documents. So dili lang about libraries and archives ang sakaron na style of writing in history, but also the use of research methods from related areas of study such as archaeology and geography. So dili lang siya about sa documents, dili lang siya about actually the archives and the libraries, but about na siya sa everything na connected ato na event. Dili lang siya archaeology and geography, but also including na si sociology, the study of the society, about psychology, kung unsaan panghunahuna di ani ng mga tao, unsay psychological na explanation sa event. Unsa pa? Language. And yes, maong matawag actually na si history is an umbrella na field. What do you mean by an umbrella na field? It is a field which is very connected with many fields. So, really, history is very interesting if you would really look at it thoroughly. Okay, next is the limitation of historical knowledge. Kani. This is an important one. Because the incompleteness of records has limited man's knowledge of history. Kaganina pa na ako ni sigig hisgot kaganina ang documents, narratives, sources. Importante kayo sa history ang kanina mga butang because syempre para mahibalaan nimo kung importante ang isa ka event, kinahanglan magud nimo og sources and tawag ani evidences. But this is also the reason why history is very limited. Because kung mag-base ka sa sources and documents, not everything that happened in the past has records. So meaning, kung ay hara ka makasulat about sa isa ka event, kung naay source, kung walay source sa isa ka event, meaning dili ka kasulat. That's the problem with history actually. Kung isa ka tibuok circle or kung isa ka tibuok pizza, ang whole na human affairs or human events before, ang naalay sources katunga lang. Then ana nakatunga sa pizza, 1/4 lang pag yun ang mga sources na nakuha nato or na discover sa tao. For example, ana ang mga na-unearth na kanang mga mga na-unearth na butang in archaeology or ang mga na-discover na writings, diaries, inana. So ana pag yun na 1/4 na sources, gamay ra pag yun ang magamit or nasulatan og history. And sa kana pag yung nasulat na history, gamay ra kaya itong nabasa. Sa ato pag yung mga nabasa, gamay ra kaya itong nasabtan. So there is really a limitation of historical knowledge. Most human affairs happen without leaving any evidence or records of any kind. No artifacts, or if there are no further evidence of the human setting in which to place surviving artifacts. Na mga events na wala artifacts. Kung naa gani artifacts, dili pag yun ta kasabot kung unsa na siya na artifacts, di ba? So the whole history of the past can be known only through the historians by the surviving records. So this is the so-called the history as records. Supposedly manggod, ang history na atong matun-an is history as actuality or history based sa kung unsa jud ang nahitabo. But what happens because of the need to have sources before you write and before you study history, mahimo na siyang history as records. That's the problem. Kasi, that's the problem jud. That's the problem with history. Because it is based on records and records are made by humans. The records that we study has biases, has limitations pod. Diba? Human beings are human beings. Historians are human beings. Human beings has faults. We are not perfect. We have our own beliefs, we have our own religion, we have our own sets of standards sa kung saan sakto sa dili. We have our own aspirations and we have our own understanding about the society. So, because of that uniqueness and our differences, pag magsulat ta about sa isa ka event, bahalag pare-parehas patag topic, it is also the same with your essays, di ba? Pag mag-essay si ma'am sa room, who are you? Who am I? Maunay topic. Pare-parehas tag topic, pero lahi-lahi taog way sa pagsulat. Why? Lahi-lahi mangguta na tawo. So, that is also the same if historians tang tanan. Magsulat ta about sa isa ka specific na event, pero lahi-lahi taog description ana. So, ang mahitabo, when we study history, because we based history in records, ang atong pong matun-an kay based pod sa kung unsa ang description sa gasulat. So, really, studying history has limitations, and that is ang kanang main focus here in this subject. To look at the events based sa way sa pagsulat, way sa gasulat, so maong hisgutan nato, i-analyze nato atong i-look ang historical event based sa documents. So, tinuod ba siya? Unsa ang iyahang value? Unsa siya ka tinuod? Unsa ka bugat ang source? So, yes. Okay, historians study the records or evidences that survive the time. They tell history from what they understood as a credible part of the record. However, their claims may remain variable, as there can be historical records that could be discovered, which may affirm or refute those that they have already presented. This explains the incompleteness of the object that historians study. Maupod ni, tungod pod ani na reason actually, maong ginatawag ang history as a developing or as a growing na field. Because every day, every year, every after sa SEM, every time na magsulat about a specific historical event, history grows. So, magkadugay, daghan pa og mag-discover o daghan pa ang ma-write about history. Nganong kinahanglan o nganong gina-encourage po ang mag-write about history? Because of this incompleteness. Because if incomplete si records, incomplete si history. So, can you imagine how incomplete the history of the Philippines is? Okay, so much for that. Let's go with the history as the subjective process of recreation. What do you mean by subjective? Di ay ma'am. Lahi si subjective o si objective. Pag nakadungog na taani sa tong English, di ba? Lahi si subjective o si objective. Pag moingon tag objective na description about sa isa ka butang, kung sa imong makita, mao na imong i-describe. For example, mag-describe ta about sa isa ka tawo. Pag moingon tag objective na description sa isa ka tawo, moingon kag taas siya, 5'6" iyang height, tambok siya, kanang mga 32 ang waistline, dako siya ilong, dako siya mata, taas iyahang buhok, sa man, tangkag iyang dalunggan. That's an objective na description. Pag mo yung subjective na description, mo na kag, feeling na ko butan siya. Feeling na ako kay athletic siya, or like, feeling siya na ako kay dili siya nagagawa silang balay. Feeling ako kay naka siya uyab. Feeling ako kay kanang daghan na siya giagian kay kuan kay siya nawong, luwi kay siya nawong. So that's subjective. So why gitawag siya ma'am nganong gitawag si history na subjective process of recreation? Because we write history based on records, and because we are humans and we look at the records based sa ato ang own na beliefs, again, as what I've said kaganina, mahimo jud siyang subjective. And I would really say na impossible kaayo na magsulat og history na objective, na totally unbiased, totally na kanang factual lang. Tungod kay tao si historians, dili jud na mawala iyahang trace sa iyang gisulat. What do you mean by that, ma'am? Tungod kay tao ka, dili jud na mawala ang imuhang part sa imong gisulat. Sa words pa lang nimong gamiton, di ba? That's your footprint ba ya? So matawag jud na subjective na subject or na field's history. So because of this, the historian's aim is very similitude. In writing history, ang aim jud ni historian is to write as truthfully and as authentic and as plausible as possible. Kani silang tulo. Mo na siya ginatawag na mao ang kani ang historian's aim, very similitude. Meaning ani as truthful, as authentic, and as plausible as possible. Okay. Unlike the study of natural science that has objectively measurable phenomena, what do you mean objectively measurable, ma'am? Kanang naa sila'y mga kuan ba? Naa sila'y equations. Kanang pag nakay hypothesis about specific na natural science na phenomena, ang example ani is physics, si biology, na matun-an sa laboratory. Objectively measurable sila because pag dili mo fit sa isa ka calculation or sa ka specific na DNA design, ang imuhang sa tawag ani ang imong conclusion na imuhang panghitabo sa imuhang study, sayop na siya diretso. So inana ba? History is not like that, manggod. It talks about humans, and humans has their own baya na mga they are kanang dili sila ma-predict jud, dili siya pareha sa DNA, sa science, sa development of the human cells and the body and all. So when we look at human affairs jud, dili jud ta ka look at that na objective. Siyempre, as humans ourselves, subjective gid ta, di ba? And makita na o mabasahan na sa imuhang document. And ato jud na siyang mahisgutan. For example, about atong topic nato or atong lecture about Cavite Mutiny. We're gonna talk about three different versions sa gasulat ana. 3 different versions kay 3 different people man ang gasulat. Isa kay Spanish official, ang isa kay based sa Filipino, ug ang isa kay ang based sa Spanish na perspective. So from these 3 versions, unsay kalahian sa ilaha ug unsay same kapareha sa ilaha. So ato nang hisgutan diri na subject. Okay, last. Historical method and historiography. The process of critically examining and analyzing the records and survival of the past is called historical method. So, again, unsay tawag sa process sa pag-examine o analyze sa records? The records na nag-survive about an event. It's called historical method. The imaginative reconstruction of the past from the data derived by that process is called historiography. Okay. Ma'am, si kalahian nila. Kasut lang, ma'am. Galibog ko, ha? Kasut lang, ma'am. The method sa imuhang pag-examine o sa imuhang paghimo sa imong conclusion, pag-analyze nimo sa isa ka record about sa past, that's historical method. You look at the sources or you write history based ani na method or based ani na process, that's historical method. Ang imuhang gibuhat, ang imuhang whole na gibuhat, that's historiography. Gets ka? For example, ani, sa pagluto nimo, ang imuhang ang imuhang way or ang imuhang gigamit na technique sa paghiwa, mauna siya historical method. But the whole process sa imuhang pagluto, mauna siya historiography. Kagets? Ang whole na process sa imong pagluto sa isa ka kanang ang whole na process sa imong paghimo or pagsulat sa history mo na historiography. Ang specific na method na imuhang gigamit sa imong pagsulat mo na historical method. Hopefully kasabot mo. If you have questions, please comment down below. Comment down sa comment section ani na video para pod matubag nako and mahimo pod siyang guide sa mga sunod na mulantaw ani na video. And ang mag-post sa ilahang questions sa comment box sa ubos will have a tawag ani plus points. Really. And sa mga makadungog ani na part, no? Narabay uban na dili jud paminawon ang whole na discussion. Fortunate ka pag nakadungog ka ani na part. And please do not share. Dapat sila jud ang makadungog. Okay? I am not kidding. Legit ni siya. And if you are not using your real name diri sa imong YouTube account, you can write your family name and the offer number or imuhang initials then offer number. Okay, so much for that. Okay. So that's the kalahian with historical method and historiography. So, by means of historical method and historiography, both of which are frequently grouped together simply as historical methods, the endeavors to reconstruct as much of the past of the mankind as the historians can. So, unsa jud ay ang purpose ani historical method o historiography? To reconstruct as much as history as possible. Because, again, nganong magsulat man ta because of the limitations. Okay. Even in his limited efforts, the historians really are handicapped. Grabe jud sila kakuan. The historians are really, kanang si tawag ani? Limited. Si word sa limited. Basta. Loading kayo ko. Because of, again, the kanang limitations of the historical knowledge, because of the kanang pagka-subjective sa process sa history, because of the lack of the sources, the historians really are very, 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 very limited jud o kanang unsa na sa tawag gani? Makuan jud sila ba? Mahinder jud sila in thriving in kanang the successful and kanang in rich na pagsulat in history. He or she, the historian, can tell the story even of a part of the past as it occurred, imbis na mahimo siyang history as actuality, nahimo na siyang history according to the records. And because of the limitations with history, maong lahi jud si history with fiction, poetry, drama, and fantasy. Because, again, history is based on sources. Okay, so according to historical analysis is also an important element of historical method. So this is the kuan ha. Again, unsa gani yung historical method? Kanini siya ang giunsa nimo pag-slice. Giunsa nimo pag-slice ang imuhang carrots before nimo siya gi-appeal sa imuhang whole na pagluto. Okay. So, this is the process of historical analysis. First, select the subject to investigate. Second, collect sources. Ikatulo, examine the sources. O unsa ang ilahang, unsa sila katinuod, unsa sila ka-genuine. And kung unsa sila ka-importante na part of the whole. Ang sources atong gisigutan diri ha. Kaupat, extract credible particulars from the sources and write about these particulars. Okay. Do you have questions? That is just it. The meaning of history, the limitation in historical knowledge based on the limitation also of sources, and then the nganong ginatawag man siya subjective process. Nganong nam siya biases. Unsa ang kanang purpose? O unsa ang aim ni historians? And what is the difference between historical method and historiography? And what is the process of historical analysis? Again, if you have questions, you comment it down below, and you will have 10 points for your participation for each na credible or like unsa na kanang valid na questions. Hopefully you have understood the lecture 3 based on this discussion. If you have suggestions and or reactions about this screen record, please message me. Okay, thank you for listening. Till the next lecture.